board work session. It is Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. It is 3:31 p.m. This session is set to go until 4 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're in Building 1, Room 280. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menster. Commissioner Gary Edwards is excused for this session as he is in an Economic Development Council retreat. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Ramiro Chavez as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. The topic on today's agenda is Flood Awareness Week and Thurston Lakes Risk. And we have Director of Emergency Services, Kurt Harding. And if Kurt, would you go through introductions, please, of our guests?
I will. Thank you very much, Commissioner. I will introduce Caroline Martin, Wendy Shaw, and Kristen Kurtz. They are all from FEMA, and they will be taking the lead on the presentation. Also, I'd like to point out that Peter Tassoni and Brandon Cheney and Sherry Nevin from Emergency Management staff are also on the call. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Wendy and let you start off with the presentation.
Okay. Hi, hello, everybody. I'm Wendy Shaw from FEMA Region 10. Just want to make sure you can see my screen, the slide, as well as hear me.
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you for inviting us today to talk a little bit about the updated maps that are coming in Thurston County for the lakes in particular. I wanted to just quickly just reiterate who's with me today. We have from our CERC contract, our Community Education and Risk Education, or I always get their acronym wrong. Carrie, Community Engagement and Risk Communications contract. Carrie Hi. And Kristen are with us today. Thank you. We all work in a world of acronyms here. And I am Wendy Shaw from the Region 10. I am the Risk Analysis Branch Chief for the region. And prior to holding that role, I was one of the regional engineers and actually worked on this project as one of the regional monitors for the project. As I heard someone bring up, oops, there we go. As I heard somebody bring up, there are probably 48 or so slides in your packet. We will only have about 22 to go through right now. The idea was we provided some supplemental information. If you had any specific data analysis questions or some other background data on where we got some of the information, we wanted to make sure you had that in front of you if you had any additional questions. So quickly, we at FEMA Region 10, when we are getting ready to update flood insurance rate maps, we have a process called the Risk Map Program. And what that does is it connects data and analysis to the National Flood Insurance Program and also hazard mitigation planning. And the idea here is for a comprehensive look at your flood risk or other hazards in the county. In this case, we focused here on the lakes. For many of you, if you've probably just finished the Nisqually River watershed update, that the appeal period just finished with that. And so if you are familiar with the process, that is, we're going to do the same thing with the lakes. And so, you know, I just wanted to go over real quickly, like why do we even do this? One of the reasons is to be able to identify the flood risk in particular. And in this case, we're looking at the lakes. The county expressed to us that there were several lakes where the currently mapped flood boundaries didn't seem to make a lot of sense. Or we had a lot of lakes where we did have some inundation happening and there wasn't a map for it. And we'll go through a little bit of those details shortly. The other thing is determine some of that local land use, right? So people like to live around the lakes. And so where are people going to be at risk? Where are their properties going to be at risk in some of these lake areas? We also want to make sure any model that is developed through FEMA is also shareable. So engineers and developers needing to do analysis and modeling can access our models and get that information and just build from them. And ideally, you know, the emergency management side of the house. So if we're going to have an area that's inundating a road, maybe overtaking, you know, some culverts, things like that, those are important for emergency managers to understand as well. So the risk map process, it's a lengthy one. Like I mentioned before, we've done a couple of different versions and iterations of this throughout Thurston County in different places. We like to approach things on a watershed basis if we can. Generally, that's the way the water flows. And what we do is we have a series of steps, right? The first one is generally discovery, in where we talk to the community about what are the needs, what's happening out there, where is your flood risk now, where would you like to learn more about maybe where it's not mapped, and talk about different avenues in which to collect that information. After we do that initial discovery opportunity, we start scoping a project, and we take a look at what can we do under the budget constraints that we all live under, and how do we process or progress this project. And then assuming that everything gets funded and everything, we move on and we do the analysis. We do the engineering, hydrology, and hydraulics, what we like to call the H&H of it all. And then we come to you with data and draft results, right? And we talk to everybody about how did we get here? And some of those supplemental slides that you'll see in your packet are specific about those engineering results that we went through. Assuming that all is going well and the engineers and everybody in the room agrees, then we progress to the preliminary phase. And what we have is a coordinating consultation officers meeting, the CCO, and that is the one that we just had a month or so ago to really kick off this public engagement opportunity. And so we generally recommend like not a lot of public involvement up until this point, mostly because the maps are pretty well vetted here. And it's just time to start engaging the public and getting their opinion on what's happening. After this, we'll move on towards that public engagement, and then we'll have a formal appeal period, and then you'll have the effective maps. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few more slides on what that schedule looks like. Okay, so just real quickly, what did we scope? What did we actually do here? Originally, we started with a pilot study of 2 lakes, mostly to determine what was going to be our study process. The lakes are complicated in some cases. In some places we had water level data, in others we didn't. Some were connected by culverts, some were connected purely by open drainages, and so we needed a process. After that pilot study, we started with 24 lakes in the city of Olympia. When we heard, then the county heard, hey, how about all the other lakes we have in the county that are currently mapped or needed mapped? And so we went ahead and at a later date added another 57 lakes throughout Thurston County in order to understand what that rainfall runoff looked like, how did they act as a reservoir perhaps, or if there was anything flowing out of the lakes during that 1% event, so that 100 year that everybody talks about. So the study, again, it's been several phases, several years in the making up to this point. So we started with the city of Olympia in 2019, and we added the rest of the lakes in 2020. So generally, it takes us a year or 2 to get most of that engineering and data analysis completed. And then we've had a couple of different meetings and check-ins along the way, first with the city of Olympia, and then of course with Thurston County engineers and emergency managers to go over that data and see where we are. The preliminary maps were finally issued at the end of June of this summer. And what we did was we had gone through all of the Olympia information, and then we held off on that project until we could catch up the rest of the lakes, so that as far as public engagement goes, we had one version to talk to everybody about for all of the lakes in the county, instead of piecemealing it and trying to do different public engagement opportunities. So in our timeline here, we're expecting a lot of the virtual outreach. We'll talk what that looks like here shortly. And then we're expecting the statutory comment and appeal period, which is that 90 days. We expect that to start sometime after the holidays. It takes a good while for us to get all of the data and analysis and paperwork through the headquarters process and get it published in the Federal Register. So just real quickly, we wanted to highlight a couple of things here. The LiDAR that we used, so that really high resolution topography for the lakes, we had a couple of different data sets that we were able to use. One was from 2011 and one was from 2015. So while our maps are generally a snapshot in time for the best available data that we have, there could be some changes in the ground if there was additional development or something like that that happened after 2015. It's possible that that might not be exactly reflective on these maps. And we just wanted you to be aware. So if folks have some questions on well, where did this land cover come from, this is what we were using to do those. Okay. So also I wanted to go through a couple of some of these complicated moments that we had with some of the lake studies. So there's a lot of different drainage basins. Not every lake had a simple drainage basin in order to calculate what was happening. In some cases, there was a little more urbanized. We had culverts, or we had ditches, or we had other things connecting lakes as well. And so we needed to really take a close look at, once the water arrives in the area, where does it go, or how does it get there? Is it trapped somewhere? And things like that. And so we took a lot of time to go through the nuances of some of these areas. And we also had a couple of pump stations, right, near the Washington Middle School. And so while this is an effective way to move the water around, it's not generally something that we would look at when it comes to mapping a flood insurance rate map. But in this case, this is an active station, and we had a lot of water level data provided by the county on what we do here. And so we were able to incorporate that in the study so that folks who understand that pump station actually works could feel confident that we were actually considering conditions on the ground. And for Thurston County in particular, we had a lot of lakes that were connected by smaller streams. And initially, the scope only included just the lake area and not those smaller creeks or streams that were connecting them. And we wanted to make sure, again, that we were giving something that made sense, right? As soon as we issue a map, the first thing people do is, well, I've never seen water there. And so we wanted to make sure that where we knew there was connection between lakes, we were doing a really good job of capturing that information. And so we also included survey in much of this study to make sure we had on the ground, looking at the lakes, looking at the outlets, and as well as surveying those creeks in between. And then just another quick one for some of the Thurston County lakes. We did have nearly 60 of them that we looked at. Again, some more complicated issues here where we had some very large lakes, Long Lake in particular, Hicks Lake here shown, where there's a fair amount of people and structures, drainages, all of those making this kind of a complicated situation. This is also why this was separated out as its very own study, because the lakes, they don't flow like a river flows. And so they also require a different kind of engineering analysis when we're looking at them. One other thing I wanted to highlight here is that we did get a lot of lake level data. So one thing that FEMA tries to do is make sure that we're checking in locally on what local information is there. If you're already monitoring it and you're already collecting data, why shouldn't we use what's already there? So we made a real concerted effort to work very closely with a lot of the county folks and a lot of the city of Olympia to make sure that we had the same data that you guys had, and that what we were predicting as far as that 1% flow or those large flood flows made sense based on the information that had already been collected. Okay, so the engineering stuff aside, how do we get the info, right? How do you see what the maps look like? There's a couple of different avenues here. One is at the official FEMA site. The official products are in the Mapping Service Center, MSC. You'll see it advertised. And this slide just gives a real quick indicator of the kinds of things that you find there. Now these maps are publicly available. If anybody knows to go to this site publicly, they can go there and they can download all of the maps and the information. If they happen to be a GIS user, they can also download that database and see that other information as well. The other thing that we've done in more recent years is we've created an online viewer, a platform, so that folks who don't have GIS or who don't want to page through 45, 100 different PDFs to try to find which panel they're on in that sort of situation. We have these, what we call them life cycle viewers. And each tab, you can page through what the process of the study was. So you can see what we had originally scoped. You can see what was the effective data. So you can see the changes there. In this case, Thurston County has had a ton going on. And so we also, in this viewer, you can see where the Nisqually update happened in the most recent time and see what those changes were too. So the idea is Thurston County has one place to go look for what is FEMA up to and what phase and what stage are we in. And we also have the Washington Department of Ecology. Jerry Franklin is actually our risk map coordinator for the state of Washington. And he puts together what he calls, it's a preliminary flood map comparison viewer. This is really handy because there's a slide bar. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this little bar will move across. And so you can actively see the changes between the effective map and the new preliminary map, or the one that we're waiting to finish and ready to go for public review. This is really handy when folks just want to take a look at, well, am I affected? Did anything change? In some cases, especially in areas where it maybe hadn't been mapped before, it's real important to understand where the properties are and what's been affected. Another really cool product that we can do now out of the risk map program is we can provide additional things. So not just that 1% flood insurance rate map boundary, we can also provide a lot more in the way of actual flood risk information. So changes since last firm, we have separate maps that are developed that highlight very specifically where were those changes, what happened. We also have some depth grids that we can provide. So when you're looking at not just, again, that 1%, that 100 year, but you want to know how deep is it? Not just how far does it go, but how deep is the water in those areas? Those are all available on different GIS layers that we can provide, to the county. We've already given the data sets to the county. But if you're looking for more information, and that's well beyond that flood insurance rate map, we can do that through this program now. And then I just want to tie this a little bit more to the hazard mitigation plan in Thurston County. I'm hoping everybody's aware of that planning effort. I think the last round you guys did was in 2017. You'll probably be looking at an update here shortly. The hazard mitigation plan is what's required by FEMA in order to access a lot of other kinds of grants and other opportunities. And so we like to make sure that you're aware that any of the data that is produced through a flood insurance rate map update, including those depth grids, including any of the impact analysis that we provide, can also be incorporated into the hazard mitigation plan. So anything that's out there, if you have any questions about how to incorporate that or who to talk to, we can definitely provide those connections as well. The idea here is we don't want to just provide a bunch of stuff and then nobody ever use it. We want to make sure that all of the data and all of the analysis and all of the engineering is put to good use. And so most people ask, well, what does it mean? How's it going to affect my insurance? What's going on there? There's a new insurance rating, risk rating 2.0. Hopefully everybody's heard that this is here now. It's just a different way of connecting what the flood risk is to what the insurance rate should be. Generally, if anybody has any specific questions about their properties, we always recommend that they go directly to, like, our flood insurance liaison is Scott Van Hoff. His contact information is on the last slide of this presentation. If there's any specific property questions, we can certainly help with that. But ideally, we always recommend anybody that's at risk of flooding at all, whether they're in the special flood hazard area or they're near it. If you're near water, you could potentially flood, and we always recommend folks, protect yourselves and your property. Okay, so what happens now? So we've done all the engineering, we've done all the analysis, we've been in your space for a few years now, so now what happens? So now we're looking at informing the community on what's going on. And so part of that is thank you for inviting us to present here. We've also done a couple of different, I talked to the Nisqually watershed folks. Anybody who would like us to come and present, we're happy to do so. And the idea is really kind of advertise that platform that's out there for folks to see what's going on. When the formal appeal period starts, you'll get a letter that says the appeal period is starting. There'll be a couple of newspaper articles that are printed as part of the awareness part, and that people know that appeal period is getting going. We can also help and support social media blasts as well through the FEMA website. We can help with content if you have a social media page, or you have another way that you would like to let people know that these are coming. Once that is done and the appeal period is open, it's for 90 days. And then if anybody has any significant comments, concerns, they have new scientific data that we didn't consider or didn't know about that we need to take a look at, we'll respond to those and then determine if we need to issue any new maps. If not, we'll continue through the process and we'll be looking to you to take another look at your floodplain ordinances, make sure all is well. The good thing is for the most part, the county has already looked at that for the Nisqually update. And so there shouldn't be a lot of surprises in updating floodplain ordinances in this regard. And then you get to adopt the maps and have new floodplain maps for the lakes. So what does that timeline actually look like? Again, like I said, we're not really expecting the formal appeal period to open until after the holidays. We also would not want to open it right when the holidays get started. It doesn't really give the public a real good opportunity to take a look at what's going on. And we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to see it. So assuming that all goes well and we don't have any major comments or any major appeals that come through, we could be looking at ending that appeal period in sometime in the spring of 2023. The letter of final determination is likely to come sometime in the fall, so about a year from now. And when that letter arrives, that's really when your clock gets started, that 6 months to take a look at those floodplain ordinances and make sure everything is in order to be able to have those effective maps issued sometime spring, summer 2024. So there's still a ways out. There's still plenty of time for the public to get involved and give us comments, and for you as well. So I just want to highlight one way we're reaching out to the communities. We have a virtual flood map update site. Well, it's a story map essentially that we have built specifically for the lakes. Sherry has been working really closely with our risk analyst, Marshall Rivers, to get this up and running, just to make sure that we're presenting the information. And I encourage you to click on it if you would, when you have the time. On each of the tabs, there's a small video, 3 to 4 minutes long, that describes each item. And this is modeled after what would be at a public meeting. So there's information on what was the study, so what's some of the basic engineering that went into it, what's the timeline to see these things done, what happens with insurance. There's a video just describing the general mapping process, like what kind of data do we collect? Do you survey? What do we do? I got the opportunity in this study actually to kind of go out with some of the surveyors. I live in DuPont, so it was pretty great to just kind of wander around with the surveyors. And it was interesting to talk to some of the community members that were out there. They're like, what are you guys doing? What's happening? Oh, hey, I'm really glad to see that this map is being updated. So we like to hear that too. And the idea here is that this is intended to entirely model a public meeting. There's also a link on this site for people who have specific property questions. They can click on the link, provide their property address, and somebody will get back to them with a very specific property map, along with an explanation on what does that mean for them on the flood insurance. And just one quick contact for the risk map team. There are a bunch of us, and feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we are happy to answer any questions you have along the way. So I'd like to offer questions if you have any.
Thank you. Questions?
Can you stop sharing the screen, please?
Can I what?
Stop sharing the screen.
Oh, of course. As soon as I find where my...
Questions, Commissioner Menster?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the menu to stop sharing.
No worries.
You're right, we're thinking of our questions.
My question's in regards to the flood insurance, and that was on slide.
And the flood insurance?
Yeah,
Would you like me to pull up the slide again?
nope, I got it.
Okay.
Give me a sec.
Okay.
For the flood risk, you know, this year, I think, I don't know, it was a strange year. And the zoning of, you know, the map zone for the insurance rates. And I mean, areas this year, early in January, got flooded that have never been flooded before. And a lot of residents suffered huge loss because of that, right? And they weren't in a flood zone per se, but it was just something unprecedented. And I'm wondering, kind of in response to kind of those rare occurrences that happen, as it hasn't been, you know, there's no historical context to it. Like what is FEMA's response to that for those homeowners that got impacted that weren't in that flood zone?
So my general understanding is that Thurston County actually regulates to floods of record, which may be higher than the FEMA minimum 1% event special flood hazard area. So there are instances where you guys are really taking that extra step to help inform and protect your residents. We will never get it 100% right because we're taking the information that we have at the time to develop the flood maps. And there are cases where there just wasn't a way to predict maybe where flooding happened. You know, was a bridge blocked? Was a culvert blocked? There are lots of different nuances to the flooding and where it happens. So we would like, if we can help provide information, if you know where the flooding was and the current maps that you have were not accurately depicting the flood risk, we would like to know about that and see if there's anything we can do to help. If we can help provide modeling, some scenarios for you, maybe be able to identify what was the thing that caused that flooding. Again, if it was a structure problem, you know, maybe there's mitigation opportunities that we can help.
It was the record
discuss.
snow and rain that came after with it.
Right, right. So again, yeah. So we're working from, you know, we're looking back to predict forward, and sometimes that isn't enough information, you know, to take a look at what's really happening in the future, right?
So,
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kurt.
I was going to say, if I could add on and dovetail into this, is we also encourage people, residents, to do financial education and do flood insurance. And the NFIP program, Thurston County is one of 10 counties that has a CRS rating of 2 or 1. That's 10 out of 1,500 in the program. So we're in the top 1%. And that gets a discount on the NFIP insurance premium for people who have flood insurance policies in Thurston County. And I will tell you, I do not live in a special flood hazard area, but I've collected on my flood insurance policy 3 times. And I will tell you that it's the best investment I've made. So I encourage people to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
I was just going to ask Kurt, we did, I think it was my first year, which would have been 2019. We did some updated maps that we had to adopt and related to the flood insurance and new LiDAR data and all of that. Is that connected to this somehow? Or can you connect those dots for me?
I cannot, Wendy, can you connect those dots by any chance? Because I can't off the top of my head, but I can go back and we can get the answer.
It was Andrew.
Mr. Kinney? Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew
Yeah.
King.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I came into FEMA almost just right before he retired. So Thurston County's worked with FEMA to update flood maps all over the place. I think there was the Chehalis, there were lots of places, and we've done this in tiny little steps along the way.
Okay.
Okay. It is 4:01 p.m. Thank you so much for coming and presenting to us. We are adjourned.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.